Hiya guys, Beard Reads Books here, and welcome to this week's book review video, in which I'll be reviewing this nice chunky little beastie, 11/22/63 by Stephen King. It's a time travel book in which the protagonist he's got the mission of saving JFK's life, sort of preventing him being assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. So this book, it was written in, Stephen King wrote it in 2011, so that's the present of the book. That's the book's present. And what it is, there's a tunnel that the protagonist refers to it as a rabbit hole that connects the present to the past. And when people use this particular rabbit hole to travel into the past, it always takes them to the exact same time. It's can't offhand remember the date, even though I've only just finished reading the book, but it always takes them back to September 1958. And then obviously when they return to the present, the rabbit hole brings them back to 2 minutes after they left. So they always return to sort of their own time. I mean, there are some rules, kind of unwritten rules with regards to time travel in this particular book. So I said one of the things that happens is when you travel into the past, you can change the past so that when you return to the present's different. It's the present has changed accordingly depending on what you've done in the past. But then if you make any further trips into the past, the changes that you made the previous time, they get wiped out. It's like a reset. So if you change the timeline and the changes turn out to be horrible, like I said, all you've got to do is go back in time again and the timeline resets to what it should be. So, and also, one of the other things is obviously when they go back into the past, they get taken back to 58. They can't jump around in time. So anyone wanting to, say, if you want to visit, say, the 70s, you've got to go back to 58 and then spend sort of 12 years in the past, sort of living through time at a normal rate until you get to the 70s. So I think that's why in this book the protagonist is wanting to save sort of JFK, because obviously preventing something like the two world wars, can't do that, can't travel back in time far enough. And changing something like preventing the Twin Towers attack, you could do that, but obviously you got to go back to 58 and then wait sort of 30-40 years before you can prevent it from happening. Whereas JFK, you go back in time, 58, you only got to wait 4 or 5 years to then sort of save JFK's life. And I mean, as you can see, it's quite a big old book. I mean, it's about 730, 740 pages in all. And it's only sort of the last sort of 100 odd pages or so where we actually get to the bit where the protagonist, Jake Eppins, is doing it, like getting to fulfill his mission. He's getting to save the president's life. So up until then, it's about his life in the past. So he travels to 58 and he's talking about sort of all the things he goes through in the past, his life experiences. So a lot of it is, I suppose you could call it a preamble to him sort of fulfilling his mission. And I must admit, it was a very enjoyable book. for me anyway, I mean, you could probably argue that a lot of the stuff in the book you could probably do away with it, and you wouldn't lose out on the main focus. You could argue that some of it is like just padding that could be got rid of, and you could slim it down a bit. But even the bits that were, for want of a better way of calling it, padding, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Every single part of the story, for me personally, added to the overall story. And I mean, I started this last Sunday, so it's what, 7 or 8. So I've read the book in 7 or 8 days, and you know, it's one of those books. As soon when I sit down and start reading it, I could happily spend like a few hours reading. And yeah, I mean, it's about really interesting about reading about how like the protagonist Jake Evans, about how he's leading a double life in the past, and how he's trying to not slip up and reveal the fact that he's from the future and all the rest, and all that. One thing I quite liked about this with this particular story was how the past has a way of wanting to preserve itself, preserve the timeline. So what was happening was, when someone went into the past and tried to change it, sort of history would try and prevent them from changing it. For example, if you wanted to like prevent somebody, well, actually no, because there was this one particular incident that got dealt with. Little girl got accidentally sort of shot by a hunter, and she spent the rest of her life like in a wheelchair because like the bullet wound sort of damaged her spine and all the rest. I think it was her spine. So the protagonist went back in time to try and like to prevent it, and he was like, as he was going to where it happened, traveling to where it happened, things would happen, like there'd be a tree across the road trying to slow him down, or the car he was in would get a flat tire, that kind of thing. So the history would try and preserve itself by trying to prevent the person who wants to change the timeline from actually changing it. But I mean, it wasn't not impossible to change the timeline, but it's just depends on how well you could fight against sort of history. And the bigger the change you wanted to make to the timeline, sort of the bigger the resistance that the history put up, sort of the more it fought back. So as you can imagine, trying to prevent one little girl from being accidentally shot and thus spending the rest of her life in a wheelchair, the protagonist didn't meet as much resistance to that as he did when trying to prevent JFK from being assassinated. So I'm not going to say too much about the ending. Obviously, like I said, the whole thrust of the book is about JFK's life trying to be saved. So I'm not going to say what happened, whether he was saved or not, or anything like that. I'm not going to really put any spoilers in. Now, it has been turned into an 8-part television event. I think I'm going to read that. I'm going to watch that. That's going to be quite interesting. Because there are some interesting concepts in this story. Yeah. Thoroughly enjoyable book. I mean, I always know Stephen King for like horror. I've read some of his horror books and enjoyed them. So to read a sort of time travel book by Stephen King, I think he's done a very good job of doing a time travel story. It's a very well put together story, and very, very well thought out, and very interesting. And yeah, and like I said, it's absolutely grabbed my attention. This thick old book, and I've read it in a week. sort of 7 or 8 days, and I would highly recommend it. Definitely. And of course, one thing I quite liked is he sort of made some not direct references, but some of his other works did get referenced. For example, the protagonist, when he's in the past, he goes to a little place. What was it called? My mind's got blank. The little place where it was set, Pennywise the Clown. Derry? Was it Derry? So yeah, the protagonist in this book, he goes to that little town, spends a bit of time in that town. I think it was Derry, so I'm going to go with Derry, and apologise if I'm wrong. Please feel free to correct me in the comments. And while he's staying there, while he's spending a few months in that town, the sort of like the residents, they don't spell it specifically, say what it is, but they do sort of make reference to sort of recent incidences that happened a year or two beforehand. And even though they don't specify what the incidents were, it's pretty obvious that they were talking about the whole instance with Pennywise the Clown and the children. I thought it was quite a nice little touch how he sort of makes indirect references to the previous works and that. I mean, another thing I liked about this book was it touched on the whole thing of, if you saved JFK's life, if you prevented him from being assassinated, the new timeline, the altered timeline that would arise out of that, would that new timeline, would that be better or worse than the actual timeline that we're living in? So it kind of touches on that particular question, sort of, would saving Kennedy's life actually necessarily be a good thing? Yeah. So then, guys, my thoughts on this particular book. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm definitely gonna see if I can get the old television program. My thoughts on the ending of this book. I'm not going to say anything about it. It was a good ending. I liked it. It's not the ending I was hoping for. I can't really say what kind of ending I was hoping for because I don't want to give spoilers. I don't want to spoil it. The ending isn't the one I was hoping for, but it was a good ending. Yeah. I think the fact that I didn't hate on the ending, but even though it's not the one I wanted, I think that to me personally says it's a pretty good ending. So yeah, I think I suppose with time travel books, whatever ending the author does, it's never gonna please everybody. I think when it comes to time travel stories, there's going to be lots of different readers who want different endings. There are so many different people that want their own, like, sort of, I want to end this way, and want it to end this way. Whatever ending the author writes, it's not going to please everybody. So, but the ending that Stephen King went with, apparently it was his son that had the idea for how to end the story. So I think, so he's got his son to thank for the ending. But yeah, the ending that you went with, yeah, it was a good one. You know, not the one I wanted, but it's one I thought, yeah, I think it's probably the right one to go with. You can't complain. So ask, guys, if you're a Stephen King fan, I would definitely recommend this book. If you like time travel stories, again, definitely get this one. Flipping good book to have on your bookshelf, guys. Definitely 100% get it on your bookshelves. Oh. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you've read the book yourselves, I'd love to hear what you thought of it. Drop me a comment. You know, especially what you thought about the ending and all the rest. And if you want to drop a comment on what you think about sort of the alternate timelines with regard to Kennedy being saved, do you think the world would be a better place if Kennedy was saved, or do you think it would be a worse place? You know, do you think that this book did a good job of the whole question of whether or not the world would be better if Kennedy wasn't assassinated? Yeah, so drop me some comments. Yeah, I'd like to hear from you. And on that happy note, guys, I'm gonna bring this video to an end, and look forward to seeing you in next week's book review video. And in the meantime, guys, as usual, take care, happy reading.